Wicked for Good, the second part of John M. Chu's epic cinematic adaptation of the Broadway classic, has finally landed in cinemas, concluding the journey of Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande's protagonists. However, it hasn't landed to the seeming universal praise of the original, with some loving it, others hating it, and many actually pinpointing issues with the original play's second half. Well, you know what I'm sure the Wicked community would love? It's another unqualified moviegoer criticising their movie. Yep, that's right. In this episode of Snack Break, I'm going to be discussing all things Wicked for Good. And hey, some criticisms, some praise. It's a mixed bag. You'll have to listen to the review to find out what I think. Let's roll the intro. And welcome to this episode of Snack Break, the podcast pop on while preparing your cup of tea or ideal snack or beverage. Coming up on this episode of the show, we are chatting all things Wicked for Good, as well as reviewing Fantastic Four First Steps, the MCU film which recently landed on streaming. Plus, we're going to be discussing everything to do with Steven Spielberg's upcoming film, which we just got a trailer for, Disclosure Day. But before all that, let's review Wicked for Good. The release of Wicked for Good marks the much-anticipated return to John M. Chu's ultra-detailed reimagining of Oz, with the Broadway show's famously worse two-parter concluding the cinematic adaptation of the epic Ozian saga of witches, persecution, and ultra-catchy songs. This film immediately bears a much darker, more mature streak than its predecessor, with the thrilling opening 10 minutes expertly illustrating the changing lives of our strange dual protagonists, with Cynthia Erivo's Elphaba, that vanished from my mind there, seeking justice and revenge as she travels the land, and Ariana Grande's Galinda, or should I say Glinda, doing exactly what you'd expect her to be doing. If you've seen that first movie, that is. From here, it's hard to ignore the disparity between this and last year's smash hit. Despite promises of diving into more mature territory, with part one so expertly laying the groundwork for what non-theatre viewers would expect to be the meat and bones of the story, the best way to explain things here is that they get a bit weird. Really quite weird. Although there is undeniable potential here, the story goes in a somewhat wayward direction, with certain sequences feeling more akin to a Wicked parody than a fully fledged sequel. Particularly those involving our beloved duo feel often confused and, dare I say, somewhat bratty, with the character development gained and abandoned at will. Which isn't to say that the performances are bad at all, it's just something with the way these two interact for the majority of this film just feels very off compared to the way that their relationship was so expertly handled in part one. Certain plot points that seem as though they could guide the story's remainder are tossed aside without a trace. One particular sequence seems to be giving way for a breakthrough into a thinly veiled discussion of the Holocaust, but instead is abandoned in favour of Wizard of Oz tie-ins. That seems really bizarre for me, and if you watch the movie, you'll hopefully see which bit I'm talking about here when I say they were looking to gain into, or it seemed like they were going to be gaining into what a lot of the inspiration for Wicked apparently is, which is discussion of persecution and obviously the absolute horror and tragedy of the Holocaust. And this does come up in this movie, but it's then just tossed aside super quickly, and we're just given Wizard of Oz tie-ins instead, which does seem a really bizarre choice. These particular features of the second film, which were almost entirely absent from the first film, referring to the Wizard of Oz tie-ins, are not a low point and do perhaps add some satisfaction for those craving MCU-style connection in Wicked, but likely contribute to the film's somewhat wonky structure and general absurdity, with certain moments occasionally seeming to forget the strength of this entire endeavour. Wicked is, in my cinema-going not at all experience with the musical opinion, just my own opinion, best enjoyed not as a remake, but a reimagining. This is not to say that this renders the film unwatchable. Certainly not, and as long as you're willing to acknowledge some of the film's kookier scenes for being kookier, then you'll certainly be in for a good time. The songs also help things along, and as much of the finale songs are generally frowned upon by diehard fans, it's been such a year of cinema since part one that I honestly could only remember a song or two from the previous outing, meaning that I was actually pleasantly surprised by much of this film's musical prowess, which it approaches with the same delicacy and style that we have come to expect. Musical interludes feel generally natural and well-earned, and I really don't remember being unexcited by the arrival of the songs, a review that, although not glowing, should hopefully make the film more enjoyable for those yet to be convinced by the musicality of what is certainly a musical blockbuster. All that, however, is to ignore this film's secret weapon, the cinematography. Both John M. Chu as the director and Alice Brooks as cinematographer have well lived up to those excited headlines declaring them as visionaries, which I have to say, when I saw this coming out a few weeks ago prior to the release of Wicked Part 2 and prior to me seeing it, I really did think that critics and I believe it was mostly American critics that these statements were coming from. I heard this on John Campion's show, actually. They were saying a lot of critics were coming in saying, John M. Chu is a visionary. This is absolutely amazing. What a director. And although I didn't question Chu's potential, the idea of him being pinpointed as a visionary, I did think maybe a bit hyperbolic, just a little bit over the top. But they have well lived up to those excited headlines declaring them as visionaries, with every shot, scene, and sequence framed and coloured to perfection. Certain scenes, even a month, several weeks after watching this film, remain perfectly captured on my mind as their composure and execution is so breathtakingly executed. It is just so well done. It's not only this that significantly heightens my memory of the film, but leaves me on the edge of my seat for more information regarding Chu's next cinematic outing. Whether Hot Wheels or Dr. Seuss, if he brings in even half the visual pizzazz to it as he has Wicked, I am more than in for it. Even if this concluding half fails to properly establish a recognisable story structure with which to execute, it is, in terms of structuring, feels a bit lopsided even for a second part of a film, if you will. The music, performances, and seriously, I want to mention all cast members are just as good, if not more so than in part one. They are really good in this. And style makes it worth it for the final 45 minutes. The film does zip by, and even if me and the friend I went to see it with couldn't help but laugh at many of the middle way plot points that were supposedly sincere, the final third really does kick things into gear. It's this part of the story that personally delivers all I wish for in this conclusion. Raw drama, emotion, and high stakes in a breathtaking narrative turn that serves all characters exquisitely, sometimes. You see, as much as I was greatly impressed by the film's transformation at this point, the ending itself left me somewhat confused, and although it was certainly unexpected and a well-earned dramatic conclusion to say the least, I still couldn't help but feel cheated by a few of the character beats that these 5 hours of content had led up to. Overall, Wicked for Good may not quite live up to the glossy heights of its predecessor and suffers from a somewhat nothing sandwich of a structure. Although the first and final act are big bread sliced solid, the middle resembles more of an uncertain jam and butter mishmash. With that weird sandwich analogy done, it's worth noting that this film is still very much worth a watch. Its visual finesse is second to none, and as I said previously, the acting and musicality shine through to create a piece that is incredibly entertaining despite its oddities. So, if you're yet to see one of the biggest films of the year, get ready for some solid fun. Just maybe don't expect it to be quite so for good as the first. I do just want to quickly mention as well that I saw this quite early on in its run in the cinema and didn't have a great audience generally. The cinema I go to is usually quite quiet at the times when I tend to go to it. So there weren't loads of people there, but the people that were there, of the people that were there, there were quite a few that just weren't really engaging. There were some young kids who didn't really seem that interested. There were some young kids running up and down the stairs. There was somebody who, for basically the first 5 minutes of the film, which I realise isn't very long, but it's the first 5 minutes, at least give it a shot, was on their phone. And perhaps they had something important to do, but I'm just recording my experience of the film. I like people to behave in cinemas. So very curious to hear what your experience of seeing the film has been like. If you want to tell us, you can email us at hwsnackbreakpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on both YouTube and Spotify. Let's talk Steven Spielberg. For those unaware, Steven Spielberg has once again defied the movie genre and all our expectations for it by dropping a trailer, a very mysterious trailer, for his next film less than 6 months before it releases. Up until a few weeks ago, we knew nothing about the upcoming June 2020, actually, let me just check that. Yes, June 2026 Spielberg movie. We were under the impression for a while that it would be called The Dish, that it would be some sort of alien-related thing, but aside from that, we knew nothing. We were then given a very mysterious trailer to do with eyes and birds. There were lots of rumors going around. We didn't know if it would be some sort of Hitchcockian remake of The Birds with Spielberg thrown in there somewhere. We didn't know what Emily Blunt had to do with it. We knew nothing. Well, we now know that Emily Blunt, Colin Firth, Eve Hewson, Wyatt Russell, Josh O'Connor, Carmen Domingo, and a whole range of other stars are attached to it, and that the film is called Disclosure Day. I'm going to read you the plot very briefly here because the trailer has since been revealed, and there's quite a lot to talk about. It seems very interesting. The Wikipedia entry reads, Disclosure Day is an upcoming American science fiction film produced and directed by Stephen King with a screenplay by Josh Coop based on a story by Spielberg. It stars everybody I've just listed. Weird. There is basically no plot. For a while, the People Also Ask tab actually still says, what is the untitled event film directed by Steven Spielberg 2026? Because we now know that movie is called Disclosure Day. And it seems to be the world being made aware of the fact, it is indeed a sci-fi to some degree, and it seems to be about the world being made aware of the fact that aliens are real. And this Disclosure Day, this titular Disclosure Day, is the day in which the, surprise, information is disclosed. And the first trailer has come out, and it doesn't give a lot. It doesn't give us that much information into aliens. But it looks very, very interesting. And in its own way, it is actually uniquely terrifying. I have to say, I am really, really looking forward to this. Spielberg, I think, has delivered a very good trailer in that it doesn't tell us much at all. It actually, for all the rumors about it being connected to, the one rumor suggesting it was connected to Hitchcockian, or it was Alfred Hitchcock's Birds, it actually, there's a certain revolt of, I don't want to say revolt of nature, but there's a presence and involvement of nature in this trailer that really connects to what I think the film is going to be about, what a lot of the themes are going to be about. And similarly, we've got some ideas with the playing of religion and all that sort of quite deep philosophical stuff, equally balanced with a lot of the more scary, somewhat terrifying, but equally just very human elements of what this film seems to be about. And, you know, we've got big crop fields disturbed by aliens. We've got nature getting involved. We've got elements of religion. This all looks really, really interesting. And I have to say, I am more than in for it. That's coming out on the 6th of June, 2026. And in the charts, it's going to be, in the blockbuster charts, it's going to be going up against the likes of Flowervale Street, which that is, people are saying it's unprecedented that we've known so little about a film. But Flowervale Street is similarly defying Hollywood, because this looks to be Cloververse related. I can't comment much on that because I really don't know that much about it, but rest assured, we're hopefully going to be, all being well, we will be telling you about this on the podcast when it comes out, because we know basically nothing about this movie. On Letterboxd, it's listed as a family in the 80s starting those bizarre happenings in their neighborhood, rumored to be a time travel film involving dinosaurs. We do have a poster or I think that's an official poster, sort of related to dinosaurs and dinosaur skulls. That all looks very interesting, and it could be in the Cloververse. But the point is that Steven Spielberg is back. He's going to be going up against the likes of The Odyssey. But later we've got Spider-Man Far From Home. We've got Spider-Man Brand New Day. We've got Supergirl. Toy Story 5, there's just so much coming out in 2026. And actually, we've got a podcast coming up very, very soon to discuss all those films and more. But case in point, I'm very, very excited. Ramble over. I am very, very excited for the return of Spielberg. His first film his last film came out like end of 2022, I think. So it 3.5 years, but it's very, very exciting. So that's all. What are you thinking about this new Steven Spielberg film? What do you think of the plot? What did you think of that first trailer, which I actually found really creepy, but as I mentioned there, just very, very well done. Please feel free to tell me. You can email the show at hwsnackbreakpodcast@gmail.com, or you can drop your thoughts in the Spotify or YouTube comments. Onwards now to my review of Fantastic Four: First Steps. The Fantastic Four have been a long time coming in the MCU. As much as we've all enjoyed the meteoric rises of Iron Man, This is Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy. It's admittedly been hard not to wonder, as we all did for so long with Spider-Man, when one of the company's biggest IPs would make its debut. Of course, there were various studio reasons as to why they were absent from the MCU thus far, although I'll personally never understand why anyone would release a Fantastic Four separate from the MCU whilst the MCU was in its heyday, additionally delaying their transition to the dizzying heights of the MCU by another 10 years. But they are finally here in full Technicolor, retro-futuristic, do good and glory. And the glory is glorious. I have to admit that I was initially a little skeptical when I heard that this film would be taking place on a different Earth to that of Marvel's main timeline. It seemed like a cheat to wait for the Fantastic Four's introduction for so long, only for them to be plonked onto a planet where they could do exactly whatever they want with no consequences whatsoever. Thankfully, though, this is the film's biggest strength. The detachment from all we know, from all the where's Spider-Man, why aren't they in the Avengers, and, excuse me, but how did we not hear about this in another film? And, bring back Tony, please. Allows the film its well-deserved time to wallow in the potential of these characters. Because these characters are, as you might have guessed, very much the stars of their own show. Literally, in some cases. You could even say they are fantastic. Whereas other MCU entries may bolster excitement by throwing a long-gone character in there, or perhaps even a not-so-long-gone one, First Steps wants you to focus on one thing and one thing only. Herbie. No, it is of course the Fantastic Four who are present with all their familial love and complexities. Just like the best Fantastic Four comics, each character has their own moment to shine, and just as you fear that one will go underappreciated, the film moves in a beautiful operatic flow, presenting brand new circumstances in which a different character will be allowed to shine. Additionally, the issue of the whole second world thing doesn't really come up too much because the stakes are very well established and the characters don't know that they're not in the main MCU, if that makes sense. Obviously, they're aware of sort of multiversal hopping stuff to some degree because it's Reed Richards, but they don't. It's not that matter. They don't know they're in the MCU. It's not that matter in this case, I should say. They don't know they're in the MCU, and so the stakes are very well established, and it does encourage you to believe in it because it matters for these characters. I would argue slightly that the film perhaps confuses itself with a somewhat unconventional plot, acts feel slightly imbalanced at times, but whereas with other films I've found this dramatically off-putting, shaking my perception of any evolution of the story, this one packs it all with so much glorious energy that some lopsided arcs are easy enough to forgive. Overall, this just might be the best thing in the MCU for a while. Sure, it's not technically within the MCU, but this gives it much needed breathing space to create a film that is simply fun, full of familial trials and tribulations, high-intensity action sequences, and retro-futuristic brilliance. That is it for this episode of Snack Break. Thank you very, very much for listening. I have been Bendigo Blue. This has been a Hungry Capper production. But before you go, we do have a bunch of stuff coming up on the channel over the next couple of weeks. We've got discussions on the new Whovian spin-off podcast of the Doctor Who spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea. We're going to be discussing all of that, breaking that down in spoilerific detail. We're also going to be discussing Stranger Things Season 5. Again, in spoilerific detail. Hopefully get one out before the finale comes out, and then presumably one at some stage reviewing the entirety of Season 5 and the ending and everything. And then a bonus episode in the form of the biggest upcoming films of 2026 and a guest episode as well. So there is so much coming up on the channel. For now though, thanks very, very much for listening. See you soon. Stay safe. Have a good one. Bye.